most of the diligence is done out of house. So you're hiring a accounting firm to do maybe a quality of earnings, or maybe even some deeper work than that. And you're hiring a law firm to do all the legal due diligence and the documentation.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast, presented by Cornerstone International Alliance. I am your host, Nick Olson. On this show, I get the opportunity to talk with the brightest minds in lower middle market M&A. Together, we discuss industry intelligence, deal management, shared successes, specialized expertise, and much more. If you serve the small to medium-sized business owner, this show will offer you tactics and insights you can use and implement now to become a master in M&A.
There's really only two types of people. There's either assholes or assholes in recovery. When you read the actual writing on our website, it's a lot more nuanced than people think. When you hear people say, well, we have a no assholes rule, is like, okay, we're good people. Those are bad people out there. We only deal with good people like us. That is not at all our mentality. We're all messy creatures. We're all, we expect to have conflict in relationship. We're not perfect. We say sorry a lot. I think the difference that we try to make is are you trying to become somebody? Are you locked into who you are? And are you purely self-interested, especially in the short term, about what, everyone, look, it's got to be good. It's got to be a win for everyone. Every deal has to be a win or it doesn't work.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast. My guest today is the CEO and founder of Permanent Equity, who takes a very much different approach to purchasing businesses, which we're going to dive into here today. And they're based in Missouri, founded in 2007. Outside of work, my guest here, Brent, is raising his three daughters, so a girl dad, love that. Working on his tennis and golf game and just helping business owners from a long-term approach, really, get that true partner to help them grow their business. So please welcome my guest today, Brent Beshore. Brent, thanks for joining today.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it, Nick.
All right, I'm excited for the conversation. Like I said in the opening, Permanent Equity, you founded this group back in 2007. Take us through why, kind of your approach, why you created this firm back in 2007, and what is your approach that you guys take, which is so unique in comparison to others out there, on how you're looking to find the right businesses, how you're going to grow them, how you're going to stay in them for the long term. Kind of give us the elevator pitch there.
Yeah, well, first of all, permanent equity is very emergent. So I'm not a finance guy. In fact, I joke that I'm the Forrest Gump of private equity. I've never taken a finance class in my life, never worked at another firm. Don't tell anybody, but I can barely open up Excel. I mean, it's whatever the opposite of traditional finance is. That's probably me. Yeah, I started a business. I was an operator. And when I had the opportunity to buy a business, I as close to accidentally bought a business as you could. And that was actually the genesis of the firm, Permanent Equity, really started with companies I started in 2007 to kind of 2010. And then 2010, February 1st, I bought the first business and bought it with an SBA loan. Had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I know a lot of M&A advisors on here listen to this. I mean, this is how little I knew. My lawyer said, hey, we got to do diligence. And I literally Googled DO diligence. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. And so, I could regale you with story after story of, me furiously Googling terms and topics and things and, trying to figure out what the heck was going on. Bought that first business in 2010 and did real well with it. Ended up paying back the SBA loan real early. A buddy of mine, I remember it was probably 6 months after I bought the business, he said, hey, you did a private equity deal. You know what? I Googled private equity. I literally didn't even know there was something called private equity when I bought that first business. So it's from these very auspicious beginnings that Permanent Equity emerges from the primordial ooze of the Midwest. Yes. And so I started another business in the interim. And then in 2015, bought another couple businesses out in Arizona. We bought the nation's largest single location swimming pool builder and, did well with that acquisition as well. We had a track record of, we'd started some things, we'd bought some things, and had just done it all with internal cash flow. I joke that Permanent Equity really started as the world's smallest family office. And so we started getting noticed kind of in 2015, 16, and we got approached to take investment. We initially said, hey, we don't have any desire to do a traditional 2 and 20 structure. We want to be long-term. We're not big fans of debt. I mean, I knew as an operator how difficult it was to just operate anyway with this in a small business. When I had that SBA loan on the first business I bought, it was incredibly stressful to operate that with the SBA loan on it. And I just really felt like it was a better structure not to have debt on the business. And so, I said, hey, I don't want to do the traditional model at all. I have no interest in that. And they said, the person I was chatting with at the time said, well, why don't you just create whatever structure you want and we'll tell you if we can do it. And so that's what I did. I presented the structure and they said, looks great, let's go. And I said, well, what now? And they said, well, we'll help you raise the money. We know a bunch of rich people. And I was like, that's great. It's one less thing to worry about. And that's what we did. So in $50 million raised in 17, and then we raised $300 million in 19 in this really unusual structure. So we raised funds. So to be clear, I mean, we're private equity. We buy equity in private companies. We're buying a majority stake typically in these transactions. But we're doing it with a fund that has a 30-year initial term and duration. So we don't have to do anything for 30 years. We're just doing whatever's in the best long-term interest of the business and our investors and the firm. And then we're typically use no debt in our transactions. So we're buying with no intention of selling the business. We're not using any debt. We're doing all of the diligence in-house, which makes us really quick and efficient at how we diligence. So we've made a lot of investments on the team that are highly unusual at our size, and really trying to treat people well long-term and build long-term meaningful partnerships and relationships and compound together for a long time into the future. And so, compared to traditional private equity, I mean, when we get in competitive situations, everyone else kind of looks the same. They're going to say the same, value add, improvement, da 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 da. They're going to put, roughly the same amount of debt on it. They're going to, do the same kind of thing. They're going to have the same time horizon. And then, we kind of look like Big Bird at the end of the table, very, very different than everyone else. And some people like it and some people don't. And I think that's great. I mean, we try to select for people who we're a good fit for. And for a lot of people, look, if all you care about is getting the highest dollar, you don't care what happens next to the firm. It's a very straightforward deal. It's uncomplicated. We're not a good fit. We're an excellent fit because of the duration that we can hold things. If there's some fur on it that makes it maybe something that debt wouldn't be a good idea, obviously, on it, or it's unleverageable, we're a really good fit. If there's some complication around the deal that, taking it up through a traditional committee structure at a private equity firm, you always think about like, what's the actual process like internally? And we bought some things that would be difficult to get through committee, let's put it that way. Or we do really well if the owner cares really what happens to the business, what happens next, and wants to stick around for a long time. So, the largest transaction we've ever done was a father and a daughter. Daughter wants to be in the business for the next 25, 30 years. It's really important who buys that business and that their visions align. And so really our structure gives us the flexibility of being able to do whatever makes sense. We're not a forced actor. We're not a forced buyer. We're not a forced seller. And we can just do whatever makes most sense, and it's good for everyone. So.
Yeah, that is definitely a unique approach. So would you say, when you're competing for deals, like I said, you're very much different than traditional private equity. Your long-term, play of, 30 years or whatever that might be, obviously is unique. Are you competing more against like a strategic buyer when you're, for these businesses, as more of like a long-term play in that regard? Like, how do you view that?
Yeah, I mean, we are kind of a weird different even from strategics, because most strategics are going to subsume that business up and take it and kind of, wipe away a lot of the, if they're
true.
a community employer, they're going to, put the jobs elsewhere potentially. They're going to, subsume the brand up into maybe a master brand and have the brand go away. When strategically in that kind of setting, when we're competing more against strategics, it is actually good for us because we say, hey, if you want to keep the firm independent, if it's important, again, to you to be a community employer, if you want to keep the same staff intact. I mean, we have a history of not really not coming in and changing these businesses a ton. I mean, obviously we'll help augment and we want to accelerate the success that the business already has, but we're not coming in and doing a 90, 120 day super aggressive plan. We're not cutting a big chunk of the executive team. We're not relocating assets. We're really trying to keep these things intact. And if we do our jobs well, we're selecting for people who are already successful and would be successful without us. And hopefully we're adding some unusual talents and relationships to the table that help accelerate growth. So yeah, it's a very different pitch kind of against a strategic versus against private equity. But I mean, we're really not in either bucket. And I mean, there's not many groups out there that are like us in kind of the way we think about things.
What is like the profile of the types of businesses you guys are looking for I said, like, with our audience and understanding you guys better, I know this could be a unique fit for a lot of these deals out there in the market right now. So just for the audience's perspective and understanding, what do you guys, what type of businesses you looking for? Maybe size, revenue, structure, like all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So we got 16 businesses in the portfolio right now. It really spans construction, aerospace, business services, manufacturing. So it looks like the island of misfit toys when you look at our website of what we have. The common theme in it is like we like to find things that there's a really good core value there, but it's usually kind of obscured or covered up by something that's maybe, we think of it as like kind of the table stakes of business hygiene, or the almost like the everything tastes like chicken layer of business, where it doesn't matter what business you're in. You got to do these things well. We're typically looking for, an owner that's either retiring or has a clear vision of how they want to kind of progress the firm forward. And from a size perspective, we're typically at the very low end, $3.5 to $4 million of free cash flow earnings, kind of in that range. The largest deal we've ever done was 17 million of earnings at close. So that's a pretty big wide range there. But we're writing anywhere between 15, $20 million check on the low end. We can write up to $100 million check on the high end. So we have real firepower. And again, we're not using debt in our transactions. So we're like the surest bet out there in the market. Like when we go under LOI, I mean, there's no checkoffs, there's no nothing. We don't have to go gather the capital. There's not a big committee. It's very straightforward. The decision makers are in the room. If we say we're going to do something, we do what we say we're going to do. We have the capital to do it. We have the staff to diligence it and document it, all in-house. And we just try to be as efficient as we can to go to close. In terms of the types of businesses we're looking for, really it's agnostic in industry. We kind of maybe have two kind of dominant themes that we play. Either one where there's some sort of, I would call it light distress, but it has nothing to do with the core business. So, we've gotten into issues where, I remember when we looked at, we own the nation's, or actually probably the world's highest end matchmaking firm. So executive search, but for love. It's a fascinating business. I never thought I would own it. I remember the first that business came to me, I was like, there's no way we're going to buy that business. That is a weird business. Well, you look at that business and they try to go out to market and sell it, and it wasn't catching. You can imagine trying to go take that business through traditional private equity committee structure. And it's like, wait, what are we buying? And what are the assets? And how does that work? Now, we love it. It's a great business, but a bank would never put debt on that business. And a committee would never approve that business. And that's one where we can come in and we can say, hey, we understand that this is a great business. We can do the work underneath it to understand it. And we're not looking to put debt on it, right? So I would say there's usually one type is like there's something unusual about the business that makes it more difficult to sell than you maybe would normally have it. Or there's some real specific talents that need to be done. We had another one of our businesses that we bought successfully. I remember the banker coming to us and saying, hey, to be frank, this is run by an older couple and who have not done things maybe the way they should have. They've lost count of inventory. There's been some irregularities with their accounting. It's just got a lot of fur on it. And to be honest, we've tried to sell it for a while now, and it just is not something. But it's a really great business. Like we've got to know it's a really, really good core business. Like that's something that we'd like to hear is, okay, hey, it's a really good core business, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Like we're going to get out our pooper scoopers and start shoveling, right? Like that's what we do for a living. I would say that's one archetype. And then the other archetype is the seller who wants to stay around for quite a while and has family members in the business, is a community employer. It matters deeply who buys the business. We do real well with those people as well, because we can offer a clear path to, hey, the day after close is going to be like the day before close. We're going to get to know your people. We're going to maybe augment around them, but we're not going to come in and cut and level set and I'll do all the things that maybe traditional private equity is known for doing. So, I think that people find us a much more kinder, gentler form of private equity.
I noticed when you talked about the type and size of the business, you did not use EBITDA. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, EBITDA can serve a function, right? But it obscures the reality, which all investments are nothing more than the present value of future cash flows, right? We call that beer money. It's kind of the colloquialism that we have in our office. We joke with our investors because of our fee structure. So we take no fees of any kind, no reimbursements of any kind. There's literally no cash that come to us except for as we return cash back to investors, we get to take a percentage of it. So we call that beer money because if you can't buy beer with it, we don't charge fees on it. And that's just kind of a term that we use in our office to talk about, okay, really at the end of the day, what matters is how much cash can you take out of the business? Do you have discretion to take out of the business and to buy other stuff with, or to reinvest back into the business? So yeah, I mean, look, we'll use EBITDA as a rough proxy, but really what we want to get down to is what is the true discretionary free cash flow of the business? That's the metric which we're valuing a lot of businesses.
This episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast is powered by Cornerstone International Alliance, where leading M&A firms come together. As part of this international network, you get access to global opportunities, over 200 M&A experts, enhanced collaboration and knowledge sharing, and some of the best M&A tools and resources available, all to help you take your firm to the next level. Ready to join this exclusive network? Visit cornerstoneia.com/new member today. Love that term, beer money. You got a lot of cool, interesting terms. I know one other thing that, in my opinion, and I told you I was talking offline that we look at this too, and I'll use it in a different word, but you got the no jerks rule. That you got, like, you don't have time for people who are like. Tell me a little bit about that and what that mentality looks like for you guys.
Yeah, well, so if you go to our website, this term's thrown around, right? We actually say asshole, right? So we say we have no assholes rule. We say that intentionally to get people's attention because there's really only two types of people. There's either assholes or assholes in recovery. And when you read the actual writing on our website, it's a lot more nuanced than people think. I think the traditional, when you hear people say, well, we have a no assholes rule, is like, okay, we're good people. Those are bad people out there. We only deal with good people like us, right? That is not at all our mentality. Like, we're all messy creatures. We're all, we expect to have conflict in relationship. We're not perfect. We say sorry a lot. I think the difference that we try to make is are you trying to become somebody? Are you locked into who you are? And are you purely self-interested, especially in the short term, about what, everyone, look, it's got to be good. It's got to be a win for everyone. Every deal has to be a win or it doesn't work. But there's a difference between trying to grind on somebody and get the most as quickly as you can from them and purely act out of your self-interest without regard for another, versus taking other people's opinions into account and trying to empathize with them and trying to learn and grow as a human. And so, yeah, I would encourage people, if you get a chance, to go on the website and read the piece. I think it's very different than people would assume.
Right. Absolutely. It's like you said, it's something that differentiates you guys, a different perspective. And, that's kind of the whole theme here, is a different perspective on private equity that you guys are doing. Now, you had mentioned you have a team in-house that can, really streamline due diligence. Kind of talk about that.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we think about a lot is just the reality of how incentives are set up. And one of the things that's confused me about traditional private equity and how firms are structured is that most of the diligence is done out of house. So you're hiring a accounting firm to do maybe a quality of earnings, or maybe even some deeper work than that. And you're hiring a law firm to do all the legal due diligence and the documentation. And while that works, the incentives of both of those parties are to basically cover their ass. Right? I mean, that's they're not there to actually get the deal done. Now, look, there's a lot of really good accounting people that do that work. There's a lot of really good lawyers. So I'm not impugning the industry. What I'm saying is the incentives are at most firms, for most people, is just to make sure you don't make a mistake and don't get sued. It's not to get the deal done. And it's to nitpick every little thing. And look, I learned this early in my career before we had brought an in-house team in. I'll never forget one of the first deals I did. I got a call from our lead attorney and he was like, hey, you can't close the deal. Deals needs to be off. We got to delay closing. I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? And he's like, we have this issue with a lien on one of the properties and, we can't close the deal. And I was like, a lien on one of the properties? Like we're leasing the property. Like, what does it matter if there's a lien on one of the properties? Like, who cares? And he's like, well, it could have liabilities. What if it gets repossessed and blah, blah, blah. I was like, but we have a lease in place. And he's like, well, it could be like up to a $50,000 issue. And I was like, we're talking about a $25 million transaction that has taken 8 months to get to the finish line. And you're saying I need to put that at risk over a $50,000 issue? And I said, okay, what are the odds that pops up? And he's like, I don't know, probably 5%. And I was like, okay, multiply 5% by $50,000. Right? $2,500 is the expected negative value of this decision. And you're saying I should delay all of this for $2,500? And he was like, well, I mean, I see what you're saying, but I can't recommend you move forward with the deal. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, close the deal, right? What it made me realize was that again, I totally understand why, but attorneys are hypersensitive to risk. That's why they're an attorney. They've seen all the bad things. That's why they're attorneys. They're not there to close the deal. And then on the other side, on the accounting side, when you actually dig into who does the actual work, I'll never forget, getting a quality of earnings back. And I was like, this doesn't tell me anything I don't already know. Like, who did this work? And they're like, oh, well, Jim, the senior partner, did the work. And I was like, oh, okay. And I talked to Jim, and Jim's like, well, it wasn't actually me. It was actually Bill, who's the VP of, whatever, who did the work. And I was like, okay, well, I'll talk to Bill. And then I talked to Bill, and it's like, well, actually, it's little Jimmy, who just got out of school, who did the work. And it's like, okay, so how the actual work's done is little Jimmy, who just got out of school, gives the work to Bill. Bill looks over it, approves it, and then moves it up to the senior partner. And then that guy puts his mark on it, and it's sent off. So the people that are actually doing the work aren't super knowledgeable, aren't well educated in what we do, and don't have any incentive. Their incentive, if you think about Jimmy's job, it's how do I crank as much work as I possibly can as quickly as I can. The guy's probably up, working 18 hours a day on Adderall. Like, is that the guy who I want to be, doing the financial diligence on the firm? Like, no. And so, again, I just think about the world in terms of selection biases, and those are terrible selection biases to have. Now, again, I get it. A lot of firms do it this way, and a lot of work gets done, and it's fine. We just think there's a better way. And so what we did is we went out and found the very best people we possibly could. It took us a long time, and brought them in-house. I mean, our CFO used to be the state auditor for the state of Missouri. She was runner-up for governor. Like, our in-house attorney was the managing partner at a massive law firm who was in charge of the M&A practice. Like, we brought them in-house because we care deeply about getting to know these businesses, because we're not going to flip them in 2, 3, 4 years, right? We're going to hold on to these for a long time and partner for a long time. So why in the world would we want to have all the knowledge be based outside the firm? We want all that knowledge to be locked in the firm, and we really want to get to know these businesses intimately. And so that it allows us, both in terms of quality and in terms of the actual knowledge, to be done at a far superior level, in my opinion.
Now, I would imagine there's a whole lot of cohesiveness within your group too, doing these deals after deals, know what to look for, kind of have that experience together over a long period of time in many deals.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think we've only gotten better at what we do. I mean, each deal we learn what not to do again, all over again. So, after time, you hopefully accumulate some knowledge.
Well, and then it talks about the efficiency of the due diligence, because due diligence can take a long time if you let it, right? Have you had any feedback, or just from either, whether it's business owners or other M&A firms that have been on the sell side, about how due diligence has gone working with you guys, and and like how quick it was, or have a good experience that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, look, deals are always hard, right? There's always conflict. There's roughly 400 things you have to decide on. It's kind of the way we think about it. And I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. You all do this for a living, so Yeah, I mean, I think overall the feedback we've gotten is that diligence is never pleasant. It's not, but we try to make it as pleasant as it possibly can. We always say to the seller and the seller's helpers that, like, we'll never be the slow ones. So we'll move as quickly as you want to move. We'll turn things as quickly as we possibly can. So oftentimes, I think the rhythm, if there's anything, there's maybe a frustration that there's we're turning things in 24 to 48 hours, and then we're having to wait, a week to 2 weeks to get something back. And then we're turning it again in 24 hours, and then we're waiting a week or 2 weeks to get something back. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's feedback that it certainly works well. I'm not sure in some cases that it accelerates that much, just because of the nature of who's on the other side doing the work there. Yeah, we've closed a deal from start to finish in, under 40 days before. So I mean, it can happen. That's not the norm. Again, I mean, I'd say one of the main challenges that we run into working with M&A advisors is, and I don't think this is pervasive, but it's almost like they don't want you to have any relationship between the buyer and the seller prior to closing. It's like the weirdest thing, right? It's almost like, hey, we want to try to, jam this thing as quickly as we possibly can. I mean, the old adage, time kills all deals, is absolutely true. A lack of relationship also kills deals. And so, one of the things we try to fight as well is, hey, we're going to have all of this work being done over here to get to know double checking everything and making sure we understand all the things that are going on. But at the same time, we need to be building a real meaningful relationship. And so making sure that we don't bypass the relationship, with efficiency and due diligence is also something we think about a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And do you have any, things that you guys would like to see to develop? Like, are there some things that we can do as M&A advisors to kind of cultivate that start a relationship, building it over time before? Because, what are some risks in your opinion from, that might, be there as to why someone wouldn't? Because like you said, you're gonna be spending a lot, you're spending a lot of time together during due diligence. Obviously, you're entering into this partnership post close. So like, yeah, just the kind of weird concept to me too as to why you wouldn't want to be able to develop that relationship during this process.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, some M&A advisors that we've experienced out of fear, they know their clients and they know that they're not all that they say they are. It's kind of like you go on the first date with somebody and you're like, this person's amazing. They have no flaws. And then you go on your fifth and sixth and seventh date, you get engaged, then you get married, and it turns out the person is a human and has flaws and shortcomings. And I think that there's some fear that M&A advisors are of like, okay, the only way this deal gets done, or it has a higher likelihood of getting done, if we can almost, kind of present that first date, gloss to the buyer for as long as we possibly can, get them pot committed, and then, hopefully they don't find out who they're really getting married to until after close, and we've gotten our fee, and Godspeed, they'll work it out. That's at least the impression that I get. And I think that there's always a paranoia I shouldn't say always, sometimes a paranoia about maybe advisors who have gotten burned from people having a relationship and direct, sort of communications that then, they get sideways, or they try to negotiate nefariously on the side or doing something like that. And so there's always like a little bit of like a chaperoning that occurs, which is always funny to me. It's like, we go on site visits with somebody, and there's like the junior M&A guy who like has to chaperone us around, like the buyer and the seller around, like, walk behind us and make sure that, no one says anything they shouldn't. It's stuff like that where you're like, hey, we're big boys and girls. We can handle ourselves. It'll be okay. You can give us a little slack. But I think it's the nature of it is that deals are hard. Everyone understands that, and there's a lot that can go wrong. And so the sort of the tighter the grip that the M&A advisor can have on the deal, maybe the more safety they feel in that. And I think oftentimes it's the exact opposite case, but I can see how it can come across that way. So.
Yeah. Obviously, you got, you want to make sure the deal's moving forward. You got a pulse on it. You kind of in the know and making sure you can do that. But I do think it's kind of a good mix of being able to have some oversight, but also start to cultivate that relationship during that process, because I think I would imagine it would help post integration, post close integration. And so when you guys. I'm sure you've been in a ton of situations where you submit an LOI, you're one of 2, 3, or 4 or whatever. What is your mentality in that time, that time of the deal? Anything you guys are, doing specifically differently to kind of, that's the obvious stuff that we've talked about here today, differentiating yourself. Like, take us through that kind of part of the deal, and what your thought process is when you're trying to, whether it's structure, your philosophy, and going up against others at that LOI stage.
Yeah, I would say when it gets kind of at least the finish line of the deal making process, we just try to ultimately decide on what is ultimately the price we can pay, and really hold firm to it. We're not big on adjusting a ton. When we make an offer, it's very solid offer. We have the capacity to do it. We do what we say we're going to do. Sort of an extreme reliability. We don't typically get caught up in the very flurry at the end of, hey, well, if you can get to here, and maybe if you can get to there, and all of that typically, sometimes it goes on, sometimes it doesn't. We just try to say, hey, we're happy if there's a number that they need to hit. Maybe we can figure out a structure, but you tell us the price if that's what you need to do, or otherwise we're just going to tell you here's kind of what we can do. We just try to be plain about it. Like, what you see is what you get. We don't play games. We're not trying to pull one over or position ourselves in such a way to win the LOI, but not to close. I mean, that's one of the things that drives me crazy about how other firms we've seen do it is, they'll intentionally overbid to knock out all the competition, make a big promise, and then they have no desire, no intention to actually, close it. And so, we just try to be, again, having a reputation for extreme reliability. We say, hey, if what you told us is true, and we obviously have to double check that in due diligence and make sure it's true, but here are the key, and we even will say, here are the key factors for us, and what our bid's based on, and making sure that everyone knows, hey, if these things change, then our bid's probably gonna have to change, or the structure's gonna have to change. But look, if these things are true, then what we're telling you is true, and let's go to the finish line. So we just try to be plain about it.
Right, right. Do you see that, happen often where, that those things that you just talked about change where then now your structure has to change? Is that something that is a common occurrence from what you guys see?
Well, I would say hmm, probably one out of every 4 or 5 LOIs that we go under, I would say have to change in some way, or we end up not closing. I mean, we had a deal this summer that was a huge bummer. They told us that the management team was basically in place, that the sellers were not necessary for day-to-day operations. They had a great CEO candidate on staff, and that everything was kind of smooth sailing. And then we get into due diligence, and we're thrilled with the deal. I mean, we're all guns blazing, ready to go. We love meeting the sellers; they were fantastic people. And then we start meeting the people who's the CEO candidate, and he wasn't a CEO candidate at all. And kind of they acknowledged, okay, well maybe he wasn't exactly a CEO candidate. And then, oh, by the way, we find out that most of the senior leadership team actually wants to leave or has plans to leave. And in fact, one of the major senior leaders wasn't even full-time employed by the company. And so it was just a very different reality than what they had told us it was. And we try to come back to them and say, hey, we checked this before we gave you the offer, but we here are the criteria that we did, and of course no one likes to get caught. So emotions can run high, and ultimately the deal didn't work out. And we said, hey, we're happy to try to restructure the deal to make it work in the way that they want to work it. And they didn't ultimately want to do that. Ended up going a different direction. But that's where it's like, man, I just ask if there's, the more truthful that the M&A advisors can be, and that they can advise their clients to be on what reality really is, hopefully you're not going to pull one over on a seller, or on a buyer. You don't want a buyer who's so stupid that they're not going to double check the things that you told them. Like that would be a good person to sell the business to anyway. So like, if the more I've just encouraged, like the more truthful, and it's like, even if the truth is hard, and even if you think it may, degrade the quality of the business, quote unquote, it's going to be found out eventually. And it saves everyone a ton of time and money if it can just be known up front. So I see that's probably the biggest frustration we have with advisors, is when they just shade the truth, or they try to be very persuasive in what they're saying and very passionate about it, and then the reality just doesn't match up with the narrative.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's just, as a true ethical approach. Yeah. We always talk about, in our group, like, go ugly early, get everything out on the table,
Yes,
and let's deal with whatever it is, because if you, like I said, it's from your perspective, something's, the perception is you're trying to hide something. Well, then you're like, okay, like, what else are you hiding, or what,
exactly.
so I think that's great advice to just, there's going to be, skeletons in the closet. Let's get them out right away. Let's talk about it. Let's see how we can, move forward and fix it. And then, I think, and that talk about relationship, that develops rapport and trust and relationship along the
Exactly.
process as well.
Look, every single person's messy, and I've never seen a business of any size or quality that doesn't have some weird stuff when you dig into it. And so the more that you're going to find it eventually, might as well just be like, all right, here's the deal. Here's the weird stuff. Here's everything you need to know. We're not aware of anything else. Great. No problem.
And we even talk about too, like, you even do that with your client, because sometimes, you hate the situation where a piece of information comes from your client that you didn't know before, just because maybe you didn't have the conversation, or they were reserved in sharing it, or whatever. So, having that conversation with your client early, so maybe it doesn't even come out, or you've addressed it before, the buyers are in the mix at all. So to have that conversation when, buyers in the mix might be a little too late. And so, you know, what would, and Brett, this has been amazing. It's definitely always great to get a unique experience, and you guys are in it for the long haul and a different approach. You got your own team and who do an amazing job. So, what would the pitch be to our audience as to why consider you guys? Why we want to put these opportunities in front of you guys to make sure that we're finding the right opportunity, but that you guys get a chance to look at these and show your differentiation.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, look, we try to be extremely reliable. Again, I keep coming back to that. Just do what we say we're going to do. We're well financed. We've been doing this for a long time. We've got a team who's excellent at what they do. We're probably not going to be the highest bidder, but we'll be right in the ballpark. of the highest bidder. And we try to be extremely flexible, and really the more relational we can be with M&A advisor, we try to be collaborative with them and how to build the bid and how to serve their client best. I mean, what we're trying to do is not to get the lowest price and to set up things for friction post close. Of course, the seller's not trying to just get the highest price and then have us realize that we overpaid for the business. A great deal that comes together, and I think the M&A advisor has a huge role to play in this, is collaborative in the sense of, hey, let's decide on where there's value there. And then let's decide on a structure and a way of working together that I think sets up things best for the long term. The more that we can have that relationship, and we have that, I mean, we're really thankful we have that relationship with quite a few advisors out there where, we always say, hey, if you're just going to blast us with just a list and it's going to be blasted the same 250 people and there's really, the seller doesn't care who they sell to, like, don't worry, like, we're not going to be in the mix on that. Like, we usually get calls, like personal calls from M&A advisors, and they say, hey, we've got something that's got a little weirdness to it. There's some fur on it. I don't think we can put debt on it. The seller really cares who they sell to. Price is important, but it's not the biggest, most important thing. They really care about culture and keeping the company intact. Those are the calls we love to get and say, hey, let's look at it. Let's get collaborative on how this could work and try to make something happen. So we just try to be extremely relational. The whole firm's young. I mean, I'm 42, plan on doing this for the rest of my life, been at it for a while. The whole team's young here. We want to develop those good long-term relationships and ultimately serve the M&A advisors by doing things that maybe they couldn't get off their plate any other way. And we're excited to do them with them. So,
yeah, amazing. That's a great description. And make sure to check out Brent and the team at Permanent Equity, and hopefully you guys can do some deals together. Brent, thank you for joining the show here today. Where can our listeners find out more about you guys?
Yeah, permanentequity.com is our website. I mean, I'm not on Twitter as much as I used to. I'm at Brent Beshore on Twitter. I'm not on there as much as I used to. On LinkedIn, I mean, kind of all the places you'd expect to find us. But yeah, feel free to reach out. Happy to get connected if anybody wants to.
All right, Brent, appreciate it. Thanks everybody for joining this episode. Listen to our conversation here today. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment. All those things help us share this episode with all the people you think might benefit from our conversation here today. Make sure to tune in every Thursday for a brand new episode. And again, thank you for joining and subscribing and tuning in every week. Thanks. Take care, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast, and a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Cornerstone International Alliance. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, share, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with more insights, strategies, and real-life experiences to help you take your M&A game to the next level.